Well, welcome back. Some pretty surprising events. This is the story of the creation of Narnia. And I think a marvelous metaphor that Lewis has Aslan singing the world into existence. Chapter 9, The Founding of Narnia. The lion was prancing to and fro about the empty land and singing his new song. It was softer and more lilting than the song by which he had called up the stars and the sun, a gentle, rippling music. And as he walked and sang, the valley grew green with grass. It spread out from the lion like a pool. It ran up the sides of the little hills like a wave. In a few minutes, it was creeping up the lower slopes of the distant mountains, making that young world every moment softer. The light wind could now be heard ruffling the grass. Soon there were other things besides grass. The higher slopes grew dark with heather. Patches of rougher and more bristling green appeared in the valley. Diggory did not know what they were until one began coming up quite close to him. It was a little spiky thing that threw out dozens of arms and covered these arms with green and grew larger at the rate of about an inch every 2 seconds. There were dozens of things all around him now. Then they were nearly as tall as himself, and he saw what they were. "Trees!" he exclaimed. The nuisance of it, as Polly said afterwards, was that you weren't left in peace to watch it all. Just as Diggory said, "Trees!" he had to jump because Uncle Andrew had sidled up next to him and was trying to pick his pocket. It wouldn't have done Uncle Andrew much good if he had succeeded, for he was aiming at the right pocket, which he thought, because he still thought the green rings were homeward rings. But of course Diggory didn't want to lose either. "Stop!" cried the witch. "Stand back. No, further back. If anyone goes within 10 paces of either of the children, I will knock out his brains." She was poising in her hand the iron bar that she had torn off the lamp post, ready to throw it. Somehow no one doubted that she would be a very good shot. "So," she said, "you would steal back to your own world with the boy and leave me here." Uncle Andrew's temper at last got the better of his fears. "Yes, ma'am, I would," he said. "Most undoubtedly I would. I should be perfectly within my rights. I have been most shamefully and abominably treated. I have done my best to show you such civilities as were within my power. And what has been my reward? You have robbed, I must repeat the word, robbed a highly respectable jeweler. You have insisted on my entertaining you to an exceeding expense, not to say ostentatious, exceedingly expensive, not to say ostentatious lunch, though I was obliged to pawn my own watch and chain in order to do it. And let me tell you, ma'am, that none of our family has been in the habit of frequenting pawn shops, except my cousin Edward, and he was in the yeomanry. During that indigestible meal, I'm feeling the worse for it even this moment. Your behavior and conversation attract the unfavorable attention of everyone present. I feel I've been publicly disgraced. I shall never be able to show my face in that restaurant again. You have assaulted the police. You have stolen—" "Oh, stow it, Governor, do stow it," said the cabbie. "Watching and listening's the thing at present, not talking." There was certainly plenty to watch and listen to. The tree which Diggory had noticed was now a full-grown beech, whose branches swayed gently above his head. They stood on cool green grass, sprinkling with daisies and buttercups. A little way off, along the river bank, willows were growing. On the other side, triangles of flowering currant, lilac, wild rose, and rhododendron closed them in. The horse was tearing up delicious mouthfuls of grass. All this time the lion's song and his stately prow, to and fro, backwards and forwards, was going on. What was rather alarming was that each turn he came a little nearer. Polly was finding the song more and more interesting because she thought she was beginning to see the connection between the music and the things that were happening. When a line of dark firs sprang up on a ridge about 100 yards away, she felt as if they were connected with a series of deep, prolonged notes which the lion had sung a second before. And when he burst into a rapid series of lighter notes, she was not surprised to see primroses suddenly appearing in every direction. Thus, with an unspeakable thrill, she felt quite certain that all the things were coming, as she said, out of the lion's head. When you listened to his song, you heard the things he was making up. When you looked around you saw them. This was so exciting that she had no time to be afraid. But Diggory and the cabbie could not help feeling a bit nervous at each turn the lion's walk brought him nearer. As for Uncle Andrew, his teeth were chattering, but his knees were shaking so that he could not run away. Suddenly, the witch stepped boldly out towards the lion. It was coming on, always singing, with a slow, heavy pace. It was only about 12 yards away. She raised her arm and flung the iron bar straight at its head. Nobody, least of all Jadis, could have missed at that range. The bar struck the lion fair between the eyes. It glanced off and fell with a thud in the grass. The lion came on. Its walk was neither slower nor faster than before. You could not tell whether it even knew it had been hit. Though its soft pads made no noise, you could feel the earth shake beneath their weight. The witch shrieked and ran. In a few moments she was out of sight among the trees. Uncle Andrew turned to do likewise, tripped over a root, and fell flat on his face in a little brook that ran down to join the river. The children could not move. They were not even quite sure they wanted to. The lion paid no attention to them. Its huge red mouth was open, but open in song, not in a snarl. It passed by them so close that they could have touched its mane, but they were terribly afraid it would turn and look at them. Yet in some queer way, they wished it would. But for all the notice it took of them, they might as well have been invisible and unsmellable. When it had passed them and gone a few paces further, it turned, passed them again, and continued its march eastward. Uncle Andrew, coughing and sputtering, picked himself up. "Now, Diggory," he said, "we've got rid of that woman, and the brute of a lion is gone. Give me your hand and put on your ring at once." "Keep off," said Diggory, backing away from him. "Keep clear of him, Polly. Come over here beside me. I warn you, Uncle Andrew, don't come one step nearer. We'll just vanish." "Do what you're told this minute, sir," said Uncle Andrew. "You're an extremely disobedient, ill-behaved little boy." "No fear," said Diggory. "We want to stay and see what happens. I thought you wanted to know about other worlds. Don't you like it now you're here?" "Like it!" exclaimed Uncle Andrew. "Just look at the state I'm in. And it was my best coat and waistcoat, too." He certainly was a dreadful sight by now. For, of course, the more dressed up you are to begin with, the worse you look when you've crawled out from a smashed hansom cab and fallen into a muddy brook. "I'm not saying," he added, "that this is not a most interesting place. If I were a younger man now, perhaps I could get some lively young fellow to come here first. One of those big game hunters. Something might be made of this country. The climate is delightful. I've never felt such air. I believe it would have done me good if circumstances had been more favorable. If only one had a gun." "Guns be blowed," said the cabbie. "I think I'll go and see if I can give Strawberry a rub-down. That 'orse has more sense than some humans I could mention." He walked back to Strawberry and began making the hissing sounds that grooms make. "Do you still think that lion could be killed with a gun?" asked Diggory. "You didn't seem to mind the iron bar much." "With all her faults," said Uncle Andrew, "that's a plucky gal, my boy. It was a spirited thing to do." He rubbed his hands and cracked his knuckles as if he were once more forgetting how the witch frightened him whenever she was really there. "It was a wicked thing to do," said Polly. "What harm had he done her?" "Hello, what's that?" said Diggory. He had darted forward to examine something a few yards away. "I say, Polly," he called back, "do come and look." Uncle Andrew came with her, not because he wanted to see, but because he wanted to keep close to the children. There might be a chance of stealing their rings. But when he saw what Diggory was looking at, even he began to take an interest. It was a perfect little model of a lamp-post, about 3 feet high, but lengthening and thickening in proportions as they watched it, in fact, growing just as trees had grown. It's alive, too. I mean, it's lit, said Diggory. And so it was. Though, of course, the brightness of the sun made the little flame in the lantern hard to see unless your shadow fell on it. Remarkable, most remarkable, muttered Uncle Andrew. Even I never dreamt of magic like this. We're in a world where everything, even a lamppost, comes to life and grows. Now I wonder what sort of seed a lamppost grows from. Don't you see, said Diggory, this is where the bar fell. The bar she tore off the lamppost at home. It sank into the ground, and now it's coming up as a young lamppost. But not so young now, was as tall as Diggory while he said this. That's it! Stupendous, stupendous, said Uncle Andrew, rubbing his hands harder together. Oh, they laughed at my magic. What a fool a sister of mine thinks I'm a lunatic. I wonder what she'll say now. I have discovered a world where everything is bursting with life and growth. Columbus. Now they talked about Columbus. But what was America to this? The commercial possibilities of this country are unbounded. Bring a few bits of scrap iron here, bury them, and they come as brand new railway engines, battleships, anything you please. They'll cost nothing, and I can sell them at full price in England. I shall be a millionaire. And then the climate. I feel years younger already. I could run it as a health resort. A good sanatorium here might be worth $20,000 a year. Of course, I shall have to let a few people in on the secret. First thing is to get that brute shot. You're just like the witch, said Polly. All you think of is killing things. And then as regards oneself, Uncle Andrew continued in a happy dream, as if in a happy dream, there's no knowing how long I might live if I settled here. And that's a big consideration when a fellow has turned 60. I shouldn't be surprised if I never grew a day older in this country. Stupendous. The land of youth. Oh, cried Diggory, the land of youth. Do you think it really is? For of course he remembered what Aunt Letty had said to the lady who brought the grapes, and the sweet hope rushed back upon him. Uncle Andrew, he said, do you think there's something here that would cure Mother? What are you talking about? Said Uncle Andrew. This isn't a chemist's shop. But as I was saying, you don't care tuppence for her, said Diggory savagely. I thought you might. After all, she's your sister as well as my mother. Well, no matter. I'm jolly well going to ask a lion myself if he can help me. And he turned and walked briskly away. Polly waited for a moment and then went after him. Here, stop, come back. The boy's gone mad, said Uncle Andrew. He followed the children at a cautious distance behind, for he didn't want to get too far away from the green rings, or too near the lion. In a few minutes, Diggory came to the edge of the wood, and there he stopped. The lion was still singing, but now the song had once more changed. It was more like what you would call a tune, but it was also far wilder. It made you want to run and jump and climb. It made you want to shout. It made you want to rush to other people and things and hug them or fight them. It made Diggory hot and red in the face. It had some effect on Uncle Andrew, for Diggory could hear him saying, "A spirited gal, sir. It's a pity about her temper, but a damn fine woman all the same. A damn fine woman." Then what the song did to the two humans was nothing compared to what it was doing to the country. Can you imagine a stretch of grassy land bubbling like water in a pot? For that is really the best description of what was happening. In all directions it was swelling into humps. They were of very different sizes, some no bigger than molehills, some as big as wheelbarrows, two the size of cottages. The humps moved and swelled till they burst, and the crumbled earth poured out of them, and from each hump there came out an animal. The moles came out just as you might see a mole come out of in England. The dogs came out, barking the moment their heads were free, and struggling, as you've seen them do when they're getting through a narrow hole in a hedge. The stags were the queerest to watch, for of course the antlers came out long before the rest of them. So at first Diggory thought they were trees. The frogs, who all came up near the river, went straight into it with a plop-plop and a loud croaking. The panthers, leopards, and things of that sort sat down at once to wash the loose earth off their hindquarters, and then stood up against the trees to sharpen their front claws. Showers of birds came out of the trees. Butterflies fluttered. Bees got to work on the flowers as if they hadn't a second to lose. But the greatest moment of all was when the biggest lump broke like a small earthquake, and out came the sloping back, the large, wise head, and the 4 baggy-trousered legs of an elephant. And now you could hardly hear the song of the lion. There was so much cawing, cooing, crowing, braying, neighing, baying, barking, lowing, bleating, and trumpeting. But though Diggory could no longer hear the lion, he could see it. It was so big and so bright that he could not take his eyes off of it. The other animals did not appear to be afraid of it. Indeed, at the very moment, Diggory heard the sound of hooves from behind them. A second later, the old cab horse trotted past him and joined the other beasts. The air had apparently suited him as well as it had suited Uncle Andrew. He no longer looked like the poor old slave he had been in London. He was picking up his feet and holding his head erect. And now, for the first time, the lion became silent. He was going to and fro among the animals, and every now and then he would go up to 2 of them, always 2 at a time, and touch their noses with him. He would touch 2 beavers among all the beavers, 2 leopards among all the leopards, 1 stag and 1 deer among all the deer, and leave the rest. Some sorts of animals he passed over altogether, but the pairs which he had touched instantly left their own kinds and followed him. At last he stood still, and all the creatures whom he had touched came and stood in a wide circle around him. The others, whom he had not touched, began to wander away. Their noises faded gradually into the distance. The chosen beasts, who remained, were now utterly silent, all their eyes fixed intently upon the lion. The cat-like ones gave an occasional twitch of the tail, but otherwise they were still. For the first time that day, there was complete silence, except for the noise of running water. Diggory's heart beat wildly. He knew something very solemn was going to be done. He had not forgotten about his mother, but he jolly well knew that, even for her, he couldn't interrupt a thing like this. The lion, whose eyes never blinked, stared at the animals as hard as if he were going to burn them with his mere stare. And gradually a change came over them. Smaller ones, the rabbits, moles, and such like, grew a good deal larger. The very big ones, you noticed it most with the elephants, grew a little smaller. Many animals sat up on their hind legs. Most put their heads on one side as if they were trying very hard to understand. The lion opened his mouth, but no sound came out of it. He was breathing out a long, warm breath. It seemed to sway all the beasts as the wind sways a lion of trees. Far overhead, from beyond the veil of blue sky, which hid them, the stars sang again, a pure, cold, different music. Then there came a swift flash like a fire, but it burnt nobody, either from the sky or else from the lion itself. And every drop of blood tingled in the children's bodies, and the deepest, wildest voice they had ever heard was saying, "Narnia, Narnia, Narnia, awake, love, think, speak, be walking trees, be talking beasts, be divine waters." That's the end of chapter 9. See you tomorrow night.